The air was heavy with smoke and dust. The ground shook with the sound of marching boots, thousands of them. An alien army stretched across the horizon, row after row of soldiers in black armor, carrying weapons that glowed with deadly light. Their banners snapped in the wind, the sound sharp like the cracking of bones. From a rocky ridge she watched in silence. The alien princess had seen many battles in her life, but never one like this. Her people were losing. The enemy was too many, their weapons too strong. Her guards whispered among themselves, their faces pale. Everyone knew the truth today. Her city would fall. And then she saw him. At first he looked small compared to the towering alien warriors. A human, just one man, standing alone on the scorched plain between the two armies. No army at his back, no banner, no shield, only a single blade strapped to his back and a calm, unshaken expression on his face. The enemy soldiers noticed him too. Some pointed and laughed, yet others shouted insults in languages the princess couldn't understand. But the human didn't move. He just stood there, legs planted firmly, eyes fixed on the sea of soldiers ahead. She frowned. Who was he? A mercenary? A madman? Or something else? The enemy commander raised his arms, signaling his troops forward. The ground trembled as hundreds began to march toward the lone human. Their weapons hummed with lethal power. The princess expected him to run any sane being would, but he did instead. The human reached over his shoulder, pulling his blade free. It wasn't alien metal. It was old, weathered steel scarred with past battles. The weapon looked almost too simple. For a fight like this, the way he held it, there was nothing simple about that. The princess leaned forward, her heart beating faster. The soldiers closed in, their war cries echoing across the battlefield. And then the human moved. It was so fast, she almost didn't see it. One heartbeat, he was still the next. He was a blur of motion. His blade flashed in the smoke, and the first alien soldier fell, his weapon clattering to the ground. The others roared and attacked, but the human twisted, ducked, and struck again. Every move was precise, clean, and brutal. In less than a minute, 6 soldiers were down. The alien army hesitated. This was not what they had expected. From the ridge, the princess felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. This was not just a fighter. This was a predator. Every movement was controlled, every strike lethal. And yet, there was no wild rage in him. His face stayed calm, his eyes sharp and focused. Impossible, one of her guards whispered. No one fights like that. But the human did. The enemy tried to overwhelm him with numbers. 10 soldiers rushed in at once. He spun, cutting through them like they were nothing but shadows. Blood stained the dirt. The sound of bodies hitting the ground carried across the plain. The human never slowed. The enemy commander growled an order. A squad of towering warriors, each twice the human's size, stepped forward. Their armor gleamed, their weapons bigger than the man himself. The princess held her breath. This had to be the end. No one could survive against them. But the human's lips curved us slightly into something that was almost a smile. The giants charged. The human moved faster. He ducked under a massive swing, driving his blade upward through armor. A roar shook the battlefield. Other warriors swung, but the human stepped aside as if he had seen the attack coming before it even began. His counterstrike split the alien's weapon in two. It was not a battle, it was a dance. The human was leading. One giant fell, then another, then the last. The ground was littered with bodies, the dirt turning dark with blood. The alien army wavered. Their confidence was cracking. This lone man, this human, had turned their advance into hesitation. From the ridge, Princess's pulse pounded in her ears. She didn't know his name. She didn't know where he came from. But something inside her told her this man was dangerous, not just to the enemy, but to anyone who underestimated him. The commander roared in anger, ordering more troops forward. But there was a different sound now, fear. It rippled through the soldiers like a cold wind, and the human, he was just getting started. He stepped forward, each footfall steady. The tip of his blade dripped red, but his grip never faltered. His eyes scanned the massive enemies ahead, and for a brief moment, they met hers. The princess froze. In that look, she felt something she couldn't explain, like he could see straight through her. Past her royal title, past her guarded heart. Then, without a word, he turned back to face the army alone and charged. The battlefield erupted in chaos once more. The alien soldiers scrambled to meet him, but it was like trying to stop a storm with bare hands. Every clash of steel, every cry of pain, every fallen soldier drew the princess deeper into the moment. She had thought this was just another hopeless battle, but now she wasn't sure. Maybe, just maybe, one man could change everything, and she could not look away. The air was still trembling from the clash. Smoke curled from the battlefield, twisting in the wind like dark ghosts. The alien princess's heart was racing. She had just witnessed something impossible, a single human breaking through an entire squad as if they were children. But now, the enemy was adapting. Across the plain, the alien commander barked new orders, his voice sharp and full of fury. The enemy line shifted. Soldiers armed with long spears moved forward, forming a wall of deadly points. Behind them, archers with glowing bows raised their weapons, ready to turn the human into a pincushion. The human stood alone in the middle of the plain, his chest rising and falling. His blade was red, but his hands didn't shake. He rolled his shoulders once, as if loosening muscles, shifted his stance slightly. From the ridge, the princess could tell he wasn't planning to defend. He was planning to attack. The first volley of arrows came. The sky darkened for a moment as the glowing shafts fell toward him, and then he moved. Not backward, not to hide, but forward. The human sprinted toward the spear wall, his step so fast and precise that the arrows missed him by inches. Some brushed his shoulder, some skimmed his hair, but none pierced his skin. He weaved through the deadly rain like water flowing around rocks. By the time the enemy realized what was happening, he was already there at the front line. The first spear thrust forward, aiming for his chest. The human dropped low, the blade flashing upward. The spear snapped in two, and before the soldier could react, the human's weapon sliced across his armor, sending him to the ground. Two more spears came from either side. He spun, using the broken half of the first spear as a shield. Sparks flew as the tips scraped against the wood. He kicked one soldier backward, then stabbed the other through the side before twisting away. The spear wall broke. The enemy soldiers cried out, their formation collapsing like dry reeds in a storm. The human was inside their line, now where long spears were useless. Its blade became a whirlwind, each swing cutting down another opponent. The archers tried to fire into the melee, but their shots risked hitting their own men. From her vantage point, the princess watched with wide eyes. The human wasn't just strong, he was unpredictable. Every movement was different, every strike designed to confuse his enemy. It was as if he could see what they were going to do before they did. It ended, and came the real test. The enemy commander growled and signaled again. This time, it wasn't soldiers who advanced, it was the war beasts. Massive creatures. Taller than two men, their bodies armored in thick, dark plating. Each one had a spiked tail and jaws strong enough to crush bone. They charged forward, shaking the ground with every step. The human glanced at them for only a second before running straight toward. The largest, the princess gasped. He's going to get himself killed, one of her guards muttered. But the human wasn't suicidal. As the beast swung its spiked tail, he leapt not sideways, but forward, landing on the creature's back in a single fluid motion. The beast roared, twisting violently. But the human's grip was iron. He drove his blade into the gaps in its armor, the steel sinking deep into muscle. The monster thrashed, trying to throw him off, but the human yanked the blade free and slashed. Again, blood sprayed, dark and steaming. The creature collapsed with a scream, its armored bulk crashing into the ground. The human jumped clear before it hit the dirt, landing in a roll and coming up to face the others. Now, the alien soldiers hesitated. Some even took a step back. This wasn't just an opponent, they were looking at a nightmare in flesh and blood. But the human didn't give them time to think. He dashed to the second beast, sliding under its swinging claws, and with a quick, upward strike, cut through the softer plates under its neck. It fell with a choking roar. The third beast turned to run, and that's when the alien army's courage truly began to crack. The princess could feel it from where she stood, the shift in the air, the fear spreading like a slow poison. These were soldiers bred for war, yet they were trembling before a single human. The commander shouted desperately, trying to rally them, but even his voice didn't carry the same authority anymore. The human stood in the middle of the carnage, breathing hard but steady. His clothes were torn, his skin streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes, they burned with a cold, focused light. For a moment, everything went quiet only, the wind and the faint crackle of fires in the distance. And then, without warning, he raised his blade and pointed it directly at the commander. The meaning was clear. You're next. A shiver ran through the alien ranks. Even the princess felt it, a deep, instinctive understanding that this man would not stop. The enemy didn't charge again. They waited, unsure. The commander's grip tightened on his weapon, his pride warring with his fear. From her place on the ridge, the princess found herself gripping the edge of the rock, her knuckles white. She didn't know if she was witnessing the start of a miracle, or the birth of something even more dangerous. And deep down, she realized something chilling. The human had not yet fought with all his strength. This was only his first strike. The plains smelled of smoke, iron, and fear. The alien army's formation was broken in several places now. Soldiers glanced over their shoulders, looking to their commander for orders, but their eyes kept darting back to the human standing calmly. Among the dead, the princess could feel it, the fragile silence before something irreversible happened. She had seen battles sway before, but never because of just one man. The enemy commander's jaw tightened. His pride could not allow this. Raising his massive weapon, he barked an order that rolled like thunder over the field. From the far side of the battlefield, new shapes began to emerge through the smoke. They were the elite. Heavily armored warriors, each wearing ornate helms, shaped like the heads of alien predators. Their armor was thick and layered, painted in deep crimson and black. Long banners trailed behind them, marking them as the commander's personal guard. There were 20 of them, and each one had fought in wars that destroyed worlds. The princess's breath caught. Even among her people, stories were told about this guard. They were the army's perfect killers, fast, disciplined, and merciless. Not even 100 soldiers could stop them once they moved together, but the human didn't move back. He shifted his grip on the sword, the blade still dripping. His stance was loose, almost relaxed, as if daring them to come. The 20 warriors began to march forward, their boots thundering in unison. The sound was enough to rattle bones. They picked up speed, charging in a wedge formation meant to crush anything in their path. The first clash came fast. The lead warrior swung his massive halberd at the human's head. Steel screamed as the human's sword met it, sparks flashing. He stepped aside and used the warrior's momentum to drive his blade under the man's arm. Piercing the joint in his armor, the warrior fell before he could even cry out. But the others didn't stop. They struck from every angle, high, low, from the sides. The human bent, twisted, and parried, his feet moving with impossible precision. One blade came for his back, but he dropped into a crouch and swept his leg out, sending the attacker crashing to the ground before stabbing through his chest. 2 down. The others circled tighter, trying to overwhelm him. From her vantage point, the princess felt her heart climbing into her throat. She could barely follow his movements now. Every strike he made seemed to be part of a larger plan, forcing the elite to shift into worse and worse positions. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the guards lunged from the side, swinging a heavy axe meant to cleave the human in half. But instead of dodging away, the human stepped into the attack, letting the blade scrape along his shoulder armor. He ignored the pain and drove his sword straight into the warrior's throat. The others froze for half a heartbeat. That hesitation was all he needed. He moved like lightning, 3 strikes, 3 kills. Ash! His blade cut arcs through the smoky air, each one precise and final. The sound of armor splitting and weapons falling filled the silence. By the time the rest realized what was happening, more than half their number was gone. Panic spread slowly at first, then faster. The perfect formation dissolved. They stopped moving as one, and that was their death sentence. The human pressed forward, his attacks sharper, faster. Every step he took pushed the survivors back. One dropped his weapon and tried to flee, only to be cut down from behind. The last of the commander's guard fought hard, but their fear was now greater than their loyalty. Soon, only 2 remained, backing away with shaking weapons. The human stopped, letting them retreat, his eyes already locking on the real target, the commander. The princess saw it in that moment, the shift. The army's most feared warriors lay dead at his feet, and the rest of the soldiers knew it. Their unstoppable commander suddenly looked mortal. For the first time, the enemy line faltered. Soldiers whispered. Some lowered their weapons. A few took cautious steps backward. The human started walking toward the commander. Slowly, deliberately. Every soldier he passed moved out of his way. Not because they were ordered to, but because none of them dared to stand in front of him. Commander's face was like stone, but his grip on his weapon had tightened. Sweat glistened under his armor. The princess's chest tightened as she realized the truth. If the commander fell here, the entire army might break. And if that happened, the war could end today. But there was danger in that too. She didn't know this man's intentions. Would he leave once the battle was done? Or would he take what was left for himself? And the human stopped a few paces from the commander. The space between them was filled with the sound of wind and distant fire. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the human tilted his head slightly, his voice calm but carrying across the field. Your army's broken. Leave now. The commander's eyes narrowed. His pride wouldn't let him walk away, not after all his years of victory. With a roar, he lunged. The human met him head-on. Steel clashed. The force of the impact shook the air. The commander was strong, but the human's movements were sharper, cleaner. Blow after blow, he drove the larger man backward. Sparks flew with each strike, the sound ringing like a blacksmith's forge, and then one sudden feint. A twist of the wristband, the commander's weapon flew from his hands. The human's blade stopped at his throat. The battlefield went silent, and in that silence, the army broke. The commander's chest heaved as the cold steel of the human's blade touched his throat. Around them, the once roaring alien army stood frozen. No one dared to move. The only sounds were the crackle of burning wreckage and the slow, steady wind that carried the stench of battle. The human's eyes didn't waver. His face was calm, almost too calm, as if this moment, this victory, was nothing more than another step in his path. The commander's pride burned in his gaze, but the fear was there too, buried deep. Slowly, he raised his hands in surrender. The human gave a single, sharp nod. Leave, he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the battlefield like a command carved in stone. The commander hesitated. His soldiers looked to him, waiting for an order that would never come. Finally, with a bitter snarl, he turned away. And just like that, the mighty army began to retreat. The sound of thousands of boots shifting from attack to withdrawal was like a wave pulling back from the shore. The once tight ranks dissolved into scattered groups, their banners lowered, their weapons hanging loosely at their sides. Some soldiers didn't look back at all. They simply walked faster, desperate to be away from the man who had shattered their pride. From the ridge, the alien princess watched with wide, disbelieving eyes. She had seen many victories in her life, but never one so sudden, so complete. One man had done what entire regiments could not. Her guards whispered around her. Some spoke of destiny. Others muttered about danger. Your Highness, one guard said quietly, that human, he is not just a warrior. He's a weapon. She didn't answer. Her gaze never left the man standing alone in the middle of the battlefield. his blade still at his side, his posture unshaken. The silence that followed, the retreat felt heavy, almost unnatural. The human stood among the fallen, the blood-stained earth stretching in every direction. Then, slowly he sheathed his sword. It was a simple motion, but it carried weight, an unspoken message that he no longer needed to fight because there was no one left who dared challenge him, and that was when the princess made her choice. She stepped forward. Her guards reacted instantly. "Your Highness, wait," she raised a hand, silencing them. Her heart was pounding, but she knew this was her moment. Leaders didn't hide behind walls when history was being made. They stepped into it. The walk down from the ridge felt longer than it should have. Each step crunched over the debris of war-broken weapons, discarded shields, bodies of both friend and foe. The smell of blood was thick, and yet she kept going. The human noticed her long before she reached him. His gaze shifted slightly, following her every movement. He didn't raise his weapon, but he didn't relax either. When she finally stood a few paces away, she stopped. Up close, he was taller than she expected, his presence heavier than any soldiers she'd known. His armor was scratched and dented, his face marked with dirt and faint cuts, yet his eyes were steady, like stone unshaken by storms. "You saved us," she said, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of truth. His reply was simple. "I wasn't here to save you." It made her pause. "Then why are you here?" He didn't answer right away. He looked past her, toward the retreating army in the distance, because they needed to be stopped. Something in his tone told her he wasn't speaking of this battle alone. There was history in his voice, scars that ran deeper than any wound. She could see. She studied him for a moment longer, then took a slow breath. "Whatever your reason, my people owe you a debt." "I don't collect debts," he said, his voice quiet but firm. It was not the answer she expected. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind tugged at her cloak, and the smell of smoke drifted between them. She could feel the eyes of her guards and soldiers on her back, watching every movement, every word. Finally, she stepped closer. The human didn't move, but his gaze sharpened. Assessing her the way he had assessed the commander before striking, "I am not afraid of you," she said. "You should be," he replied without hesitation. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Perhaps, but fear is not what I feel right now." There was a shift in the air, something unspoken passing between them. She realized with a strange certainty that she was looking at a man who could change the course of worlds. But only if he chose to, and she also knew that choice could not be forced. For the first time since the battle began, she let herself speak not as a princess, but as a person. "If you will let me, I would stand beside you." He studied her for a long moment, then looked away, as if deciding whether her words were truth or just another layer of diplomacy. "You don't even know me," he said. "I know enough." She replied. Silence again. And finally he gave a short nod, not agreement, but acknowledgement. It was not the start of an alliance. Not yet, but it was a beginning. The princess took one more step forward until she was close enough to touch him. She didn't not yet, but the thought was there. It's unspoken and dangerous. In the quiet aftermath of war, the battlefield stretching out behind them, and the setting sun casting long shadows, she realized something else. This was not the end. This was only the moment of truth. The battlefield was quiet now. It's too quiet. The alien army was going to retreating into the distant hills where the smoke swallowed them whole. The screams and the clash of weapons were replaced by the faint crackle of small fires and the soft moan of wind moving through the ruins. The human stood alone in the center of it all. His shadow stretched long in the fading light, falling over the bodies of those who had thought him an easy kill. His blade rested in its sheath now. The memory of its work still hung heavy in the air. From the ridge, the princess began walking. Again, her steps slow but deliberate. She passed broken spears, shattered armor, and the still forms of soldiers, both enemy and her own. The scent of blood was everywhere, thick enough to cling to her skin. She was used to the noise of victory cheers. Horns, voices raised in celebration. But here there was nothing. No one dared to cheer. Not yet. When she reached him, the human didn't look at her right away. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, as if watching for something or someone that hadn't yet appeared. "You could have chased them," she said softly. "I could have," he replied. "Why didn't you?" "Because victory isn't about killing every last one," he said, his voice calm. "It's about making sure they never want to face you again." She understood the truth in those words, but there was something else behind them, an old weight. In his tone, the kind carried by men who had fought too many battles around them, remaining soldiers began to approach cautiously. They didn't come too close. Even her own guards kept their distance. Glancing at the human with a mix of respect and unease, the princess noticed his breathing now, slow but deeper than before. Not exhaustion exactly. It's more like restraint, as if holding himself back from something. "You're wounded," she said, pointing to the cut across his shoulder. He glanced at it, then shrugged. "It's nothing." It wasn't nothing, but she let it pass. The two of them stood there in silence for a moment, the smoke swirling between them. She realized that this stillness felt heavier than the battle itself. It was the kind of silence where choices were made, choices that could change everything. Finally, she broke it. "You have no army, no banner, no cause that I can see. So why did you fight for us?" This time, he looked at her directly. His eyes were unreadable, but there was no hesitation in his answer. "I didn't fight for you," he said. "I fought because I won't stand by while tyrants burn everything in their path." Her breath caught at the conviction in his voice. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't even pride. It was a simple, unshakable truth. "Then maybe we share more than I thought," she said quietly. His gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. Then he stepped past her, moving toward the ridge. She turned to follow him, her guards trailing behind. As they climbed the slope, the city walls came into view in the distance, still standing, though blackened from the fighting earlier. She thought of the people inside, waiting to hear if they still had a home to defend. At the top of the ridge, the humans stopped. From here, they could see the full extent of the battlefield. The dead lay in dark patches across the plain, their weapons scattered like broken teeth. The princess stood beside him, and for the first time since the battle ended, she spoke with the weight of command. "When we return, they will want to know who you are. They will want to call you savior." He shook his head. "Don't call me that." "Why not?" "'Cause titles turn men into symbols, and symbols become targets." She considered his words. "Then what should I call you?" "Call me nothing," he said simply. "Just remember what I did here." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I will, and so will they, no matter what you want." There was another long silence, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was settled. As they began the walk back toward the city, the sun dipped lower, casting the battlefield in deep gold and shadow. The human's pace was steady, his posture straight, as if the weight of the day had left no mark on him. But she saw the faint stiffness in his shoulder, the way his eyes scanned the horizon even now. He was a man who never stopped watching for danger, because danger had been his companion for too long. And she realized something else: he wasn't staying. When they reached the city gates, the guards opened them without question, their eyes wide as they took in the sight of the human walking beside their princess. Inside, the streets were eerily quiet. Faces appeared at windows. Doors opened just enough for eyes to peek out. No cheers, no celebration, it's only silence. It was as if the entire city was holding its breath. The princess stepped forward, raising her voice so all could hear. "We live another day," she said. Because of him. The people looked at the human, and in that silence, something passed between them. Not gratitude exactly, not yet. It was more like the cautious acknowledgement of someone they didn't yet understand. The human didn't speak. He didn't bow. He just stood there, letting the silence say what words could not. And in that moment, Princess understood why this victory felt different from all others. It wasn't loud. It wasn't filled with the false comfort of celebration. It was a victory in silence, one that would live longer in memory than any shouted triumph. Night had fallen over the city, but the tension from the day's battle still clung to the air. Torches flickered along the walls, casting shifting shadows across the cobblestones. The streets were quiet, yet every corner seemed to hold an unspoken question. What happens now? The human sat alone in a dim courtyard just inside the palace grounds. His armor was stacked beside him, cleaned of blood, but still scarred from the fight. He was sharpening his blade in slow, deliberate strokes, the faint rasp of metal against stone echoing in the stillness. He didn't look like a man who had just saved an entire city. He looked like someone who had already moved on in his mind, his thoughts somewhere far away. From a balcony above, the princess watched him. Hours had passed since the gates closed behind them, but the image of him standing on that battlefield, surrounded by enemies, yet unshaken, refused to leave her mind. She had seen courage before, but never like his. Her advisors had been restless all evening. Some warned her to keep her distance, that he was too dangerous to be trusted. Others urged her to bind him to their cause before another kingdom offered him more. She listened to none of them. She would decide for herself. With quiet steps, she left her chambers and descended into the courtyard. The human noticed her long before she reached him. He set his blade down, but didn't rise, his eyes following her calmly as she approached. "You move quietly for a princess?" he said, his tone neutral. "You move loudly for a man who doesn't speak much," she replied, a small smile touching her lips. For a moment, they simply looked at each other in the torchlight. The tension was different now. Not the sharp edge of battle, but something slower, heavier. "I came to thank you again," she said, stopping a few paces away. "You already did," he answered. "Not properly." He tilted his head. And what does properly mean to a princess? She hesitated. "It means not from a balcony, not in front of the court. It means here, face to face." The human leaned back slightly, studying her. "Most rulers don't step down from their walls. They keep their distance from people like me." "I'm not most rulers," she said simply. He gave no reply. But his eyes softened in a way she hadn't seen before. The silence stretched between them until she finally stepped forward again, closing the space between them. "Tell me something," she said. "When you stood against that army, did you think you would win?" "No." The honesty in his answer caught her off guard. "Then why fight?" He looked away for a moment, toward the shadows along the courtyard wall. "Because sometimes winning isn't the point.
Oh.
Sometimes you fight to show them they can't break you." She felt the truth of his words settled deep inside her. It explained why he didn't boast, why he didn't revel in his victory. He hadn't been there for glory, and that made her trust him more. She took another step closer, now only an arm's length away. "If I asked you to stay, if I asked you to fight for my people, what would you say?" He met her gaze again, and there was no hesitation in his answer. "I'd say I don't fight for rulers. I fight with people I believe in, and believe in me," she said quietly. The courtyard seemed smaller now, the torchlight warmer, the air between them charged. Her guards were nowhere in sight. It was just the two of them, two people who had seen the same battle from different places, and now stood face to face in its quiet aftermath. He didn't answer right away. She could see the conflict in his eyes. Trust didn't come easily to him. But he also wasn't pushing her away. "You don't know what you're asking," he said finally. "I do," she replied. "I'm asking you to stand with me when the next fight comes. Because it will come." His jaw tightened slightly, "And when it does, people die." "I know," she said. "But with you here, fewer will." That made him pause.
Hey.
For the first time, she thought she saw a flicker of something almost like acceptance. Still, he rose to his feet, standing tall before her. "If I stay, I'm not your soldier. I'm not your servant. I fight my way, or not at all." Her lips curved into a faint smile. Greed. The human studied her for a long moment before giving a single nod. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough for now. Then in a gesture that surprised even herself, she stepped closer still and placed a hand lightly on his arm. The muscle beneath was solid, the warmth of his skin real against the night's chill. "You could have left after the battle," she said softly. "But you didn't." That tells me more than you realize." For a moment, he didn't move. Then, he gave the smallest, almost reluctant smile, rare thing on his face. "Maybe I just wanted to see what kind of ruler leaves her balcony to speak to a stranger," he said. "And what do you think?" she asked. "I think," he said, his voice low, "you're braver than most of the men I've fought beside." The words were simple, but they struck her like a blow. Not because of flattery, he didn't seem the type to flatter, but because they felt entirely true. In the quiet of the courtyard, under the shifting torchlight, the distance between them was no longer about rank or title. It was about choice. And tonight, she had stepped forward. The city was asleep, but the princess could not rest. She walked the palace corridors in silence, her bare feet whispering against the stone floor.
Outside.
The night sky was heavy with stars, yet her mind was restless. The battle was over, but her heart still carried the weight of everything she had seen, the clash of armies, the retreat of the enemy, and the lone human who had made it happen. She stopped at the open balcony that overlooked the courtyard. Below, she saw him again. The human was sitting on the edge of a stone bench, elbows resting on his knees, his sword leaning against the wall beside him. He wasn't wearing his armor, now just a plain shirt, torn in places, revealing the rough scars of battles long past. For a moment, she simply watched him. The torchlight flickered across his face, casting shadows in his eyes. He looked, not in body, but in soul. She knew that look. She had seen it in veterans who had lost too much. Without thinking, she descended the steps into the courtyard. The sound of her approach made him lift his head. "You should be resting," he said quietly. "I could say the same to you," she replied. He gave a faint shrug, as if rest was something he didn't believe in. They stood there for a moment. In the cool night air, the sounds of the sleeping city barely audible around them. Finally, she took a slow breath. "When the enemy fled today, I thought it was over. But the truth is, I've never been more certain it's only the beginning." He looked at her, waiting. "You've seen more battles than I ever will," she continued. "Tell me honestly how long before they return." His answer came without hesitation. "Not long. A few weeks, maybe less. They'll want revenge." Her chest tightened. "Then we need to prepare." His brow lifted slightly. "Yes," she said firmly. "If you're still here when they come back, I want you with me. Not as a soldier, not as a weapon, as someone I can trust to fight when I can't." There was a pause, a long one. Then, with that same steady calm he always had, he said, "And if I leave?" She stepped closer, her voice lowering. "Then I will hope you remember this city. When it burns." He studied her in the torchlight, and something in his expression shifted, not quite a smile, but not as guarded as before. "You speak like someone who isn't afraid of losing." "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper, "but I'm more afraid of standing alone." Those words seemed to settle between them. She could feel her pulse quicken, not because of the fear of war, but because of the man standing in front of her. The human rose from the bench. Now, they stood at equal height, only a breath apart. His eyes were searching hers as if trying to see past the crown, past the armor of her own title, to the person beneath. For a moment, the world outside the courtyard seemed to fade. "You've carried this city through more than I can imagine," he said slowly. "But you don't need to carry it alone." Her heart beat faster at his words, and before she could stop herself, she stepped forward and placed her hands lightly on his chest. She felt the solid strength there, the quiet steadiness. "You stood against an army today," she said softly. "Let me stand beside you." For the first time, his guard seemed to lower completely. His hands came up not to push her away, but to rest gently at her waist. The touch was careful, as if he wasn't sure if she wanted it. She didn't move. Back. The night air was cool, but his presence was warm, grounding her in a way nothing else had since the battle. They stood like that for a moment, and then, without ceremony, without the weight of titles, he pulled her into his arms. It was not the embrace of a warrior claiming a prize. It was the embrace of someone who understood exactly how close they had both come to losing everything. She closed her eyes and let herself lean into him. For the first time since the war began, she felt safe, not because the city walls still stood, but because she knew he would be there when they fell. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them was stronger than any promise they could have made in words. When she finally stepped back, his hands lingered at her sides for a heartbeat longer before falling away. "Tomorrow," she said, meeting his eyes. "We start preparing." He nodded once. "Tomorrow." As she turned to leave, she realized that the fear she had felt earlier had lessened, not because the danger was gone, but because she was no longer facing it alone. And in the quiet of that night, under the watch of the stars, she knew this was not the end of their story. It was the beginning.